In the endless dark of space, where countless stars burned like cold fires, there existed a law that no alien dared to break. It was not written on stone, nor carved into metal. It was carried in whispers, in warnings, in silent fear. The law was simple yet stronger than any empire's rule. The law said, humans must never be touched. Humans must never be harmed. The story of this law traveled across galaxies, from the frozen moons of the far north to the burning suns of the southern arms. Every race knew it. Even the proudest warlords, those who crushed whole planets under. Their fleets lowered their heads when the word human was spoken. No one dared to test the law. No one dared to ask why. But silence hides curiosity, and curiosity burns brighter than fear. On the command deck of the Zurkai fleet, a young commander stood staring at the stars. His name was Kethar, child of warriors raised on tales of conquest and dominance. To him, fear was weakness, and weakness was death. Yet he noticed something strange in the way his people obeyed the law of the humans. His soldiers, bold in every battle, grew quiet whenever the name was mentioned. His leaders, who laughed at other enemies, whispered like cowards when the subject turned to Earth. Why? Why did the galaxy tremble at the sound of this one fragile species? Why were humans untouchable? Kethar had seen them from a distance once. He had seen their small colonies, their metal cities, their thin bodies walking under alien suns. They looked weak. Their weapons seemed primitive compared to the shining cannons of the Zurkai. And yet, every chart, every rule, every order said the same thing. Do not harm them. It was madness, and madness demanded answers. The commander walked through the archive chambers of his ship, past walls of glowing data crystals. He searched, old records, battles long forgotten, treaties written before his birth. Many files were sealed, locked behind codes of high council authority. But Kethar was determined. What he found only deepened his confusion. Reports spoke of wars where humans fought not with vast fleets but with small forces that somehow turned tides. Stories told of battles where entire alien armadas vanished, yet human losses were few. Descriptions spoke of courage that broke enemy lines, of eyes that did not fear death. The more he read, the less it made sense. Numbers should have crushed them. Technology should have erased them. And yet, humans survived. More than survived. They forced the galaxy to bend. Still, there was something missing, something hidden. Many records ended abruptly, as if someone had erased the truth. Some commanders' names were removed, their reports cut short. It was as if history itself wanted to protect the secret. Kethar grew restless. He began asking questions in the fleet halls. The older warriors shook their heads. Do not speak of this, they warned. The law is for our survival. The council members looked at him with cold eyes. You must not dig into this past. Accept the truth as it is. But he could not, because he felt the truth was close. One night, as the ship drifted in silent orbit above a mining world, Kethar looked out of the wide observation window. Stars burned cold in the void. A single thought echoed in his mind. What if the law is not about mercy? What if the law is about fear? The Zurkai were not the only ones who obeyed. He had seen alien diplomats, reptilian, insectoid, machine-born, all bow to the same rule. Entire species, different in every way, shared the same silence about humanity. That unity itself was unnatural. The galaxy never agreed on anything. Empires fought over dust and stars. Armies clashed for pride, for power, for hunger. Yet on one thing they all stood together. Humans must not be harmed. Why? Kethar felt a chill run through him, though the chamber air was warm. The law was not written in wisdom. It was written in terror. He could see it in the faces of those who warned him. They were not speaking as leaders. They were speaking as survivors. For the first time, he felt the weight of that silence. It was not respect. It was not honor. It was fear carved into the bones of every race. But fear of what? He closed his eyes, listening to the soft hum of the engines. Somewhere in the shadows of the stars lay the answer. The humans were not strong because of their ships. They were not feared because of their numbers. There was something else, something hidden in their nature, something no warlord dared to provoke. The young commander knew he had crossed a line. By asking questions, by searching too deeply, he had already broken an unspoken rule. But his blood burned for truth. He wanted to know why the galaxy had surrendered to this one species, and in his heart, a dangerous thought began to grow. Perhaps one day, he would be the one to test the law. Cathar could not sleep. The hum of the great ship's engines filled the air, but it only made his thoughts sharper. The law about humans twisted in his mind like a knife. His people had built their empire with fire and steel, but one small species stood above them, untouchable. The silence of his commanders was worse than any answer. It was not wisdom, it was fear. Cathar was not like the others. He had been raised in battle schools where weakness meant death. He had been taught that every mystery must be solved, every enemy studied. So when the elders told him to stop asking questions, he felt only rage. If the law was true, then why hide the reason? If humans were dangerous, then why let them live? If they were weak, then why protect them? None of it made sense. The commander began his search in secret. He visited the old data chambers late at night when the crew slept in their quarters. He unlocked sealed files, using codes stolen from careless officers. The more he read, the more his hunger for truth grew. Records spoke of forgotten wars where humans faced impossible odds and still walked away victorious. Fleets 10 times their size had burned. Worlds that resisted them had vanished into silence. But the strangest part was what the records did not say. Many files ended with sudden cuts as if someone had erased the final report. Whole sections of history were missing, torn out like pages from a book. The commanders who had written them were gone, their names erased from honor rolls. Cathar began to feel that the greatest fear of the galaxy was not just humans, it was the truth about humans. He pressed on. The more he searched, the more strange details appeared. In one report, a human fleet was described as primitive, with weaker weapons and slower ships. Yet somehow they destroyed an advanced armada in less than an hour. Another record spoke of soldiers who fought on foot, using weapons that looked crude, yet their courage broke the minds of alien warriors who had never known defeat. It made no sense. Technology wins wars. Numbers win wars. But humans, weak and small, turned battles into nightmares. One night, Cathar found something different. A half-broken file deep in the archives. The words were old but clear. Do not test the humans. They are not what they seem. Their strength is not in their ships nor their weapons, it is in their spirit. They cannot be broken. To fight them is to awaken something that should never wake again. Cathar read the words again and again. What did it mean? Spirit. It was nonsense. Wars were not won with spirit, they were won with steel and fire. Yet the warning chilled him. The next day, Cathar called a meeting with an old officer, a veteran of many wars. The old alien had scars across his face, and his eyes carried the weight of things he never spoke. Cathar pressed him for answers. Tell me, Cathar demanded. Why is this law so sacred? Why do we bow to these creatures? The old officer lowered his head and shook slowly. Do not ask this, Commander. You are young. You do not know. I have seen what happens when the law is broken. I have seen ships vanish. I have heard the screams on the comms. I have watched entire fleets dissolve in light. But how? Cathar pressed. What power do they hold? The officer's hands trembled. It is not power as you think. It is not a weapon you can see. It is something else, something older, something that does not die. That is why we obey. That is why all obey. The commander leaned back in silence. The words made no sense, yet they filled him with unease. The galaxy was full of weapons. Every empire had its terror. But this was different. This was not just fear of defeat. This was fear of something deeper, something beyond reason. Still, the hunger in Kethar's mind refused to die. If all others chose fear, then he would choose knowledge. One cycle later, he found what he sought. His spies reported that a small human colony lay on the edge of alien space, far from Earth, far from any fleet. It was small, fragile, unguarded. To most, it was meaningless. But to Kethar, it was a chance, a dangerous plan formed in his mind. If the galaxy refused to speak, then he would see with his own eyes. He would test the law himself. The commander knew the risk. To strike at humans was forbidden. The punishment was death. But curiosity burned brighter than fear. Late that night, he stood before the stars, his claws tightening around the railing. The galaxy bowed to humans. Entire empires obeyed their law. But Kethar would not bow. He would uncover the truth, even if it cost him his life. And so he gave the order. A single ship would move toward the human colony. Silent, hidden, unseen. The crew did not know the full truth of their mission. Only Kethar carried the weight of it. Only he knew the law he was about to break. As the engines roared and the stars shifted, the commander whispered to himself, "If humans are truly untouchable, then let me be the one to touch them. Let me see what makes the galaxy tremble." The ship drifted into the void. Unknown to Kethar, the moment he gave the order, the eyes of something old turned once again toward him. The law was not just a warning, it was a shield. And by breaking it, Kethar had awakened the shadow behind. Editor. The Zurakai vessel moved like a shadow through the black sea of space. Its engines whispered, its hull cloaked in silence. No beacon marked its path. No signal betrayed its course. Commander Kethar stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the glowing star map. Ahead of them lay the human colony, a fragile cluster of metal domes and towers resting on a barren world. To most, it looked weak, defenseless. To Kethar, it was the key to the galaxy's greatest secret, the crew whispered among themselves. They had heard fragments of rumor, half-truths of what this mission meant. Some suspected the truth, and unease grew in their voices. The law was not spoken lightly. To disobey it was not rebellion, it was suicide. Yet none dared confront their commander. Kethar's will was iron, and his hunger for answers was stronger than their fear. The human colony grew larger in the view. Screens. Its towers glimmered under a pale sun, smoke curling gently from factories, lights blinking in patterns across the surface. The people moved below, small figures, fragile compared to alien soldiers. They looked unguarded, unprepared. Easy prey. Kethar's second officer, a sharp-eyed veteran, spoke at last. His voice was tight with dread. "Commander, the law forbids this. If the Council learns..." "The Council hides the truth," Kethar cut him off. His voice carried cold steel. "They cower in silence. I will not. We will discover why this law exists. Today we learn the truth." Orders were given. The ship descended toward the planet's orbit, cloaked in silence. Scanners reached out, painting the surface in invisible waves. No human defenses appeared. No fleets came to intercept. It was as if the humans had left their children alone in the dark. Kethar felt a surge of triumph. Perhaps the law was nothing but myth. Perhaps fear had grown fat on lies. "Prepare the strike team," he ordered. The soldiers moved, armored figures clashing their weapons in readiness. They expected resistance, yet none came. As the landing craft broke from the ship and fell toward the colony, the silence grew heavier. The vessel touched down on barren rock. Dust swirled under its engines. The soldiers marched out, black armor glinting under the pale sun. They moved toward the colony gates with the confidence of conquerors. Then the air changed. The first soldier froze mid-step. His weapon trembled, in his hands. A cold weight pressed on every chest, an invisible hand squeezing breath from their lungs. The sky above seemed darker, though no cloud moved. The sun itself dimmed, as if the world had been placed under shadow. Kethar felt it too, standing inside the command deck far above. A presence pressed into his mind, not a voice, not a sound, but something deeper. It was as if the stars themselves had turned to watch. The lead soldier raised his weapon toward the colony gate. The moment his finger touched the trigger, light tore across the sky. Not fire, not plasma, not any weapon known to alien science. It was a flash that came without sound, a brilliance that cut across every shadow. In that instant, the entire strike team vanished. Not burned, not destroyed. Vanished. Their armor clattered empty to the ground. Their weapons fell in silence. The soldiers were gone, erased as if they had never existed. On the command deck, alarms screamed. Systems shut down without cause, lights flickered, screens cracked with static. Cathar staggered, gripping the rail as his ship trembled. A voice entered his mind. It was not alien. It was not machine. It was human. The law is not yours to test. The words came without sound, etched into his thoughts like fire. His crew collapsed in terror, their minds overwhelmed. Some screamed, some clawed at their heads. Others fell silent with wide, empty eyes. Cathar stood frozen, his heart pounding like war drums. He tried to speak, but his voice was nothing against the presence that filled the ship. We are not prey. We are not weak. The galaxy remembers us in silence. You tried to break that silence, now you understand. The human colony below still glowed with harmless lights. Its people walked their streets unaware of the storm above. Yet something watched from behind them, something vast and invisible, something far older than any alien empire. Cathar realized the truth. The law was not built by councils or emperors. The law was written in fear by survivors who had seen what humans truly were. Not their ships, not their weapons, but something else. Something that could not be explained, something that could not be fought. His ship shook once more. Systems flickered back to life. The presence faded, leaving only silence. The empty armor of the strike team lay scattered on the barren rock, the last proof of their existence. Cathar's claws tightened on the rail. He had wanted answers. Now he had them. The galaxy's law was no myth. It was the only thing standing between life and extinction. The second officer, pale and trembling, turned to him. "Commander," he whispered, "what have you done?" Cathar did not answer. His eyes remained locked on the colony below, on the humans walking in peace. He had tested the law and learned the truth. Humans were untouchable not by choice but by nature. And in the shadows of space, he felt the echo of the voice again, softer now but filled with unshakable certainty. "We are always watching." The silence on the Zurkai warship was heavier than the void outside. Every corridor echoed with fear. Soldiers whispered prayers in their native tongue. Officers avoided each other's eyes, and even the engines seemed to hum with unease. The law had been broken, and the galaxy had answered. Cathar did not sleep. He sat alone in his chamber staring at the fragments of armor retrieved from the strike team, pieces of black metal still warm with no trace of the warriors who once wore them. They had not died. They had been erased, gone without battle, without blood, without mercy, and above all, the voice still rang in his head. "We are always watching." He had wanted answers, and now the questions burned hotter. Who were these humans? What force shielded them? Was it a weapon, a power, or something older, something beyond understanding? Cathar began to search deeper. The incident had shaken him, but it had also given him proof. Proof that the law was not a lie, not a superstition. It was truth, hidden under silence. And he, reckless, though he was, could no longer turn back. He returned to the sealed archives, hacking into the highest layers of the Council's data vault. Alarms whispered in the system, but he silenced them one by one. At last he reached the oldest records, the ones erased from common memory. What he found froze his blood. The galaxy had once united against the humans. Not one empire, not one fleet, but all of them together. The Zurkai, the insectoid Kreth, the reptilian Vorn, the machine-born Silith, all had raised their armies. All had marched to war. Billions of soldiers, thousands of ships, a tide of power so vast it could crush 100 worlds in a single sweep. And at the center of that storm was Earth. The record spoke of the first battles, fleets descending upon human colonies, soldiers expecting easy victory. But each time the humans stood, and each time something unexplainable happened. A Kreth swarm twice the size of Earth's defense fleet was broken in a single day. Reports said the humans fought with desperation, yet their desperation did not weaken them. It turned them into fire. Soldiers who should have fled instead charged headfirst, cutting through enemies like a blade through glass. Then came the second battle, where a Vorn warlord brought his armada to burn Earth's moon. His fleet never returned. Not a wreck, not a signal, not a whisper. Gone. The record said only this: they vanished in silence. The war dragged on. Each empire threw its might against humanity, and each time, the results grew stranger. Ships lost, before firing a single shot. Armies broken by enemies who were outnumbered 10-1. Entire campaigns ending in madness, as soldiers refused to fight after seeing humans stand unbroken against impossible odds. Kethar read one report again and again. It described humans not as conquerors, not as monsters, but as something far worse. They fight as if death is nothing. They fight as if the void cannot touch them. They fight as if they know something we do not. The last record was the most chilling. The Great War had ended not with treaties, not with surrender, but with silence. The fleets had vanished. The survivors, few and broken, returned with hollow eyes, refusing to speak. The galaxy made its choice then. It was not worth the risk, it was not worth extinction. And so the law was born. Do not touch the humans. Do not test them again. Kethar leaned back, claws digging into the chair. His heart thundered in his chest. The truth was worse than he had imagined. Humans were not protected by pity. They were protected by fear, the kind of fear that breaks empires. The commander rose, pacing across his chamber. He thought of the colony below, the small, fragile people walking under their pale sun. They looked weak, but behind their eyes burned the same fire described in the records, a fire that had forced the galaxy to bow. The door slid open. His second officer entered, pale and trembling. "Commander, the Council demands your presence. They know what you did." Kethar's jaw tightened. "Then they know the truth as well." The officer shook his head. "No, Commander. They will never admit it. They will bury it, like they buried the war. They fear you now, as much as they fear the humans." Kethar's eyes darkened. He understood. The law was not only about humans. It was about silence, about control. The Council feared the truth because truth was dangerous. If the younger generations learned what humans had done, they might seek war again, and war with humans was suicide. The officer lowered his voice, almost whispering. "Leave it, Commander. Forget what you saw. Forget what you know. For your life, for all our lives, do not speak of this again." But Kethar could not. He had seen too much. He had read the records, heard the voice, felt the shadow of humanity's power. To him, silence was worse than death. He returned to the command deck and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there humans watched. They always watched, and the galaxy, proud and vast, lived in fear of them. Kethar clenched his fists. For the first time he did not feel fear. He felt respect, but he also felt something more dangerous. Temptation. Because deep inside he wondered what would happen if the silence was broken again. The Zurkai warship drifted in the dark, far from the human colony. Its crew was broken, shaken to their bones. Whispers moved through the halls like cold wind. Some prayed, some cursed, and some refused to speak at all. They had witnessed the impossible, and the impossible had left scars deeper than any battle. Wound Kethar stood alone in the observation deck, staring at the planet below. The human colony glowed faintly under its pale sun. From this distance, it looked harmless, almost fragile, like a child's toy left on barren stone. Yet Kethar now knew the truth. Weakness was an illusion. Fragility was a mask. Behind it lay something vast, something untouchable. The Council's order came quickly. A transmission burned across the comms. Return at once. Stand trial. You have broken the law. Cathar listened in silence. His claws tapped the steel rail. Trial meant death. He had expected nothing less. The law was sacred, and he had crossed it. But as he stood under the cold starlight, he wondered if the council feared his disobedience, or feared the truth he now carried. His second officer approached, voice low and trembling. "Commander, what will we do? The council will erase us. They will bury what we saw like they buried the war." Cathar did not turn. His gaze remained locked on the glowing colony below. "They may erase us," he said, his voice steady. "But they cannot erase the humans. They cannot erase what they are." The officer's throat tightened. "Then, what are they?" Cathar's eyes narrowed. He remembered the erased files, the vanished fleets, the voice that had burned into his mind. "We are always watching." He remembered the strike team vanishing in light, armor left behind like shells. "They are the shadow behind the stars," he answered. "They are the fire that does not die. To fight them is to end yourself. That is why the law exists. It is not mercy, it is survival." The officer shivered. "Then why tell me this? Why not let me forget?" "Because forgetting is the greatest danger," Cathar said. "If silence is broken without warning, if pride blinds the young again, the galaxy will burn. Someone must carry the truth. Someone must remember." The officer lowered his head. He understood, even if fear still clung to his heart. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The ship trembled as if touched by unseen hands. The crew gasped, rushing to stations, but no weapon fired, no enemy appeared. Instead, a single signal filled the comms. It was not alien. It was human. The screen lit with static, then cleared. A human figure appeared, blurred by distance but sharp enough to freeze every breath in the chamber. It was a woman, her eyes calm, her face unshaken. Her voice was steady, quiet, yet filled with power. "You broke the law," she said, "but you did not understand it. So we give you this warning, one final time. Do not harm us. Do not test us again." Cathar stood straight, his claws tight at his sides. "Why?" he demanded, though his voice trembled. "Why do you let us live? Why not destroy us now as you destroyed the fleets before us?" The human's eyes seemed to pierce. Through him, through every wall, every shadow. "Because we do not seek conquest. We do not seek glory. We seek silence. We seek peace. But if peace is broken, if silence is denied, then the fire returns. And when it returns, nothing can stand against it." The image faded. The comms fell, silent. But the warning hung heavy in the air, heavier than chains. Cathar exhaled slowly, his heart pounding. He turned to his officer, to his crew. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with fear, yet he saw something else in them now, a spark. They had seen the truth, they had heard the warning. The silence could no longer hide it. He raised his voice, strong and clear. "Remember this day. Remember what you saw. Tell no lies. The humans are not weak. They are not prey. They are the law. If you forget, if you grow proud again, the galaxy will be ash." The crew lowered their heads. No one argued. No one doubted. They had seen too much. The warship turned, engines burning softly, as it left the human world behind. The colony below returned to its quiet life, unaware or uncaring of the eyes that had watched. Cathar stood at the window until the planet was nothing but a star in the distance. He knew his own fate was sealed. The council would condemn him, erase his name, silence his story, but the truth would not die with him. The truth would live in whispers, in warnings, in the silent law that no one dared break again. As the void stretched before him, he whispered one final vow. Humans are not to be touched. Humans are not to be harmed. They are always watching, and they are always ready. The stars gave no answer. But in the quiet, Cathar felt it, the gaze of humanity, eternal and unseen, and the galaxy obeyed.